Welcome to Music and Medicine. Welcome to Music and Medicine.
Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis.
Sure. Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis. I'm here with the lovely Cindi Hilfman. She has an amazing story of being a transplant recipient ×2. And her first kidney was donated by her husband, who we just talked with, Greg Hilfman. So I want to talk a little bit about, because he mentioned to us that this is a really rare disease that I don't think they've come up with the name even to this day.
It's a kind of a birth defect, essentially. It's like a variant between medullary cystic, so only not like autosomal dominant polycystic disease, which is very common.
Right.
So all the cysts were in the medulla of the kidney, and then I had medullary sponge, so I had all the calcium problems with the stone formation. So I passed tons and tons and tons of stones. So I was like 2.5 the first time that my kidney obstructed.
Right, and I should say 2.5 years old.
Yeah, they
just
don't
to
see
clarify.
that.
No.
Like that's a pretty unusual thing. So I'm from South Dakota, and they took my appendix out because they didn't know there's a fever and
they figured classic. Right, and I have family from Minot, so I'm very familiar with South Dakota.
Yeah.
Yes.
Your family's
my
from
mother's,
Minot, North
he's like,
Dakota?
yes,
My mother is from up there.
Oh yeah, see, look,
wow,
it's
that's
small
fantastic.
Yeah, you never know.
I know, we're like same.
Exactly, there you go, right. We're going to talk about a little bit more of that too, because, so this goes on all throughout your childhood, every, how often you were passing stones?
It's perpetual. I passed stones all the time. It was continuous. By the time I was 3 years old, they were completely calcified.
Right,
so they're just, I had stents, ureter stents, but I would get pyelo, like, all the time, and sepsis.
And pyelonephritis is just for
it's a
people
kidney infection. And so when the bacteria leaks, out into the bloodstream, then it would become sepsis, and then it could go anywhere. And so I had some very life-threatening infections. I lived on IV antibiotics, essentially, for a long time. And the sequelae of not having, that's not great to do forever, and eventually ran out of available drugs. And due to, I was very fortunate. I worked and I have a golf performance career, and a couple of my clients had really did me a solid by reaching out to LA, to UCLA, and getting me admitted into that transplant program, and then I got the love kidney.
Right, to say the least. But let's talk a little bit sort of the steps to that. So you're going through your teenage years and even early adulthood, and constantly having the infections, trying to find antibiotics, medicines, and then sometimes hospital stints, and then you even wind up at Mayo. And let's talk about what they find and how that went.
So that was, I went to Mayo a few times, but as a real small child, they took out like a part of my right kidney at that point, because they were just unsure of what it was, and it was obstructed and necrotic, and so they did that. So at that point, they thought it was purely medullary cystic, which is end-stage renal failure by adolescence. But mine didn't exactly follow that course. I would intermittently have to have dialysis with infection only. So it wasn't like, it still worked a little bit. There was still some function in it. And I remember going back to Mayo as a teenager, asking about transplantation just from the pain suffering part of it, which was long, and everybody will tell you their one kidney stone story. Imagine passing them continually. Like, there were some months it would be 20 times. It was terrible. And so at that point, they did not, insurance did not want to pay to do the bilateral nephrectomy. Most transplants, they don't do the nephrectomies.
Oh, wow.
Most people that end up in transplant are diabetic, or because they have malignant hypertension or something that are untreated. So they didn't, nobody wanted to throw them away. And so...
Meaning because they're still functioning a little bit?
Because they worked a little bit. And so...
And you were very young.
And I was young. And so insurance was always, it was just a battle with insurance forever about trying to, they thought as long as there was IV pain medication, there should be no you know, no problem. So it basically boiled down to the end with infectious disease. They were like, we can no longer use Vanco. We can, you know, that went through all of the spectrum of the antibiotics that I could no longer use. And so it was like, we're going to lose this battle to infection. And I had a great couple of doctors here that went over to UCLA with me and presented the case. And
And got you accepted.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about your life, though. I mean, as a young person, and certainly as a young woman going through this, it's very atypical. I mean, it's hard to even find a community to sort of bond to or reach out to, and just how you really sort of conquered dealing with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I pulled around an IV pole at school. I was picked on a little bit. So, you know, that vibe of it. I'm going to tell you that music saved me.
Okay.
I really believe that. Like, I'm a diehard music fan. And my brother is 5 years older than me, and he gave me all of his records and all that. And I spent so much time, like, in pain. Music was the distracting thing. But I was a good student, and I'm a pretty resilient human. And
to say the least.
Yeah, I just like, I don't know, I just kept thinking, I have to be in medicine. I have to figure, I'm also in medicine, I think I told you that. But I have to figure this out, you know. I really wanted to be a doctor, but I was a little too sick. I tried to go to medical school one year, and I was hospitalized too much, and a buddy of mine that was a doctor said, you'd be great as a physical therapist, you should reconsider this whole thing. And so that ended up being the path, and it was good. But, you know, it's not easy for people that are different, you know.
To say the least. No, you're very modest about it. Talk to us about when you say things like that, because they're so powerful, how music saved you. What kinds of things did you listen to? What did you like to listen to? How did it help pick you up?
I know. I loved, so like everybody, I loved the Beatles and Tom Petty and Jackson Brown. And I was convinced that Air Supply was not a band for me.
Because you've got to tell us that.
It just was like, they were it was not my thing. And then, but I loved the Bangles. But I listened endlessly to I mean, that Jackson Brown record, Late for the Sky. I wore that record out. Like, it was, my brother really informed my music because he was older than me. And that was, so it was good. I love music. Still to this day, I'm singing all the time. I get in trouble for singing in school. I just like, that's the way I cope. Were there things, especially since you've gone into medicine, that you felt, I'm drawing from the words, I'm drawing from the lyrics, the vibrations? Were there different elements about it that you felt sometimes as you were going along, it would literally give you that word or that encouragement or that support? Well, I remember waking up in the ICU when I had endocarditis, and a friend of mine had put a boom box by the bed. And it was Jackson Brown's voice, but it was a song I'd never heard, and I knew every single song.
Of course.
Like,
and
oh my God, I'm in heaven. Something happened to me. This is a new song. I don't even, like, I didn't, like, a new record came out in the period where I was unconscious. And she put it in there, and it was like, so I remember that, it's called Sky Blue and Black. I woke up to that, and I thought, there was like that like, profound thing where you just focus on the words because you're in pain and in ice baths and you know, all of that stuff, that all of that goes on, and that's all you can think of. It's amazing.
And another part I want to tease out is sort of this whole therapy class that you wind up going to. How did that come about that you wound up going to it?
So I had some childhood trauma, obviously. And my therapist had wanted me to go to this experiential therapy. Greg and I both use it like as a retreat for hopelessly messed up people.
That's a polite way of saying it.
That's how we say it. But we might use a different word. And so then we, it was in my state. It made sense for me to go. And I saw him in the airport. Before we got put in the same small group. So like the serendipity bits of it are kind of amazing. Like, because I saw his eyebrows and I was just like, oh my God, those are so beautiful, those eyebrows. And he, yeah, we got put in the same small group, and it was instant, like crazy, instant love.
Right. And did you sense that love at first sight?
Yeah.
And can you tell people that it still exists and it
Yes.
can still last a long time
It
than
can last
just
30
more than
years.
TV
Yeah,
show?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll never be cynical about love.
Sure.
I mean, it is, you know, I always say this is the house that love built. This is the studio that love built. I am here because of love.
Right.
You know, there is no other, I shouldn't be here. You know, there's no other.
Well, you should be, but it's just amazing that
yeah,
circumstances that helped continue to keep you here.
Yeah, serendipity, incredible.
Yeah. So talk to us about sort of that whole process. You get together. I mean, at first you certainly wouldn't have known that he was anywhere musically related.
No.
You're in the middle of South Dakota.
I know.
God forbid.
The first thing I heard him, that first night, he was sitting behind me and he was railing against a certain organized religion.
Sure.
And I thought, oh, I love this about this person. I turn around and, of course, it's the eyebrow guy.
Right, sure, right.
And he's fantastic. His voice is getting louder and louder, and he's making his points, and I'm just laughing, thinking of all the people around me who were maybe cringing at what he was saying.
Right.
But then I remember he said something to me about my boots.
Right.
And they weren't new, by the way, but it was a good line.
So exactly it worked.
and then we just went through a lot of heartache. Like, he's feeling like he has a life of riches, and you know, why it wasn't perfect. You know, it's that age-old thing.
Sure.
Like, I have so much, but why isn't this working?
Right.
And I'm running from just a terrible scenario. I'm just trying, and it doesn't make sense for me to fall in love with him. Like, you know, a few weeks after he leaves, I have a feeding tube in my nose. You know, it's like not, you know, it's just, but he kept showing up. He kept showing up, kept coming to South Dakota.
Of all places, sure.
Over and over again.
Right. And then when you learned about the music piece, did that just sort of seem to add yet another layer?
I watched him play the piano that week, and I sat on the bench next to him. Do you remember that? Yeah. And yeah, for me, that's everything, because, you know, I held music. Music held me.
Yeah.
And so I loved it when this is a freestanding studio, but for a long time the studio and I were in the same room, and I could hear him play all the time. He's such a beautiful pianist.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Wow. Talk to us a little bit about sort of this whole transition now. You were bringing up UCLA before, of just, you arrive there. These places are very intimidating for most people. Yeah. The whole concept of transplant is relatively foreign. I mean, we don't usually even see people on interviews or talking about it and things like that. What was your sense? I mean, you had been in a lot of medical centers and lots of hospitalizations and ICUs, but just in terms of that whole process and what advice you could give to people about it.
It's advocacy is, you know, if I'm in medicine and I understand it, but advocacy is, oh, sorry, I hit the thing. But advocacy is really important. And if you cannot get there yourself, if you can't, you know, understand, you need to reach out. There are so many people who can handhold you through that process. You just need to get with the right people. And I was very, very lucky. I had somebody that put me immediately in touch with the chief of both surgery and transplant medicine, and the rest was incredibly, you know, you get an education in kind of a crash course in learning how to live as a transplant patient. You trade one set of problems for another. You know, it's immunocompromise is a big part of our lives now, and COVID. You know, I just was here for 2 years, did nothing except garden, you know, and heal myself because I had a complication. You know, but I got to get rid of those native kidneys, those pain, you know, so I went from a life of depending on pain medication and antibiotics to live, to not needing pain medication anymore.
Wow.
And that was the greatest gift of the love kidney.
Sure.
Even though he talks about only 10 years, but he was the one who took the pain away.
Right.
Like,
wow.
Like took the pain away.
Right. That you had lived with for since the time.
For 40 years.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing.
You know, that's a long time of people cannot grasp that, because a lot of people have passed 1 or 2 kidney stones.
Right. Sure.
And they know that you're like begging God, laying your face on cold surfaces.
Right.
You know, it's like, you know, it's crazy. So he did that.
Sure. Let's ask you the same question you asked him, this whole concept of kismet and serendipity and karma, that of all people and places you would meet somebody who was the man of your dreams, literally, without even necessarily knowing that at the time, and then ultimately he would be a match of all things. Right?
That's so weird.
Right.
It has to make you believe in karma or serendipity or whatever gets you to the love place.
Right.
You know, like that's, I don't know. Some people would say miracle.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then how did the outpouring of affection feel for you, just knowing that everybody was rooting for you? And I saw the regular updates on Facebook and things like that, and putting together a fundraiser and donating things and their time and their music.
It's such a great community. The Bangles are a family. Right. We are a family. Like, I spend a lot of time, you know, grateful for those Peterson girls and Michael Steele and Sue. They are just, that is an extraordinary. I'm not going to eat until they get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Right, sure. Sorry.
Sure,
no, please.
No. I just, you know, it's a family, and Topanga is a community of beautiful bohemian spirits that, you know, I have a great friend group. I have an incredible group of people that support and love. And it was one of the funniest things in the world, because the local paper, it put in like all these friends of Greg's came out for this whole thing, and they said, and Cindy's friend Tim Davis.
One friend in the world.
I have one friend, and he's a physiatrist.
Oh, look at that! Wow, who would imagine? That's my field, by the way.
Isn't that funny?
Physical medicine.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have the one friend, Tim Davis, and he's
a good friend to have.
Yes, he's a great friend. Sure. And so that made me laugh. But my friend group, our friend group, you know, is incredible. Like, we still have an Air Supply friend, you know, family friend group, and all of the girls. So it's an amazing collection of misfits.
Absolutely. That can work together to get something incredible done, and save a life from pain. When you hear the words music and medicine, especially since they've represented two parts of your life, what does it mean to you?
So I feel very strongly that that the healing art is, you know, I'm a physical therapist, and it is a healing art, and I feel like music is instrumental in healing people. It is often overlooked and considered woo-woo, but it is a coping mechanism. I have a brother who is had an aneurysm and is confined to a wheelchair, and he has more serotonin because of music. Like, honestly, it is, even though his body doesn't work, he's like so lifted by music. I watch it happen to people. I work with veterans, and I look at how you know, when we're doing some painful rehab from difficult injuries. I had a kid that was, you know, in the very beginning of the invasion in 2003, had a severe brain injury. Incredible story. He was saved by Sanjay Gupta, who was there embedded with the Devil Dogs, and he debrided his head with got rid of the hematoma with a tent drill. I mean, it saved. He was pronounced dead by 3 medics in the field, and it saved him. So when he came home, and I'm teaching him how to walk, talk, do all the things all over again, he, you know, I would have to turn music on all the time to like get him get him to smile and
Right.
come back, like
Sure,
come
right.
into his body and
Right.
want to do the work.
Wow.
I use music for a lot of, people in pain. It
Sure.
worked for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I think it's so important. And I'm glad you talked about some of the work that you did as a physical therapist. What recommendations or advice would you give to somebody that may be facing this, may need to have a transplant, or may have a transplant and be dealing with rejection issues?
Rejection is tough. I had a really complicated rejection where they could not figure out why I was having all this mycophenolate toxicity.
Sure.
And, it's part and parcel. It's part of it.
Right.
You have to be you have to really improve your own health literacy enormously.
Yes.
You have to be proactive. You have to trust yourself when things don't feel right.
Right.
And you have, there's a lot of behavioral modifications that goes with this life. You have to be careful. You have to
Right.
be a little more careful.
Right. Sure.
But I believe strongly in this journey, and the altruistic donors, the people who don't even know
Right.
they're people,
Sure.
are my heroes.
Right.
At UCLA, there's so many stories, like this woman saw a sign in a Starbucks from this incredible story, and
Right.
when you see how it changes their life,
Sure.
it's so
Wow.
that's magic.
Right. Right.
the
Sure.
good
Giving
stuff.
life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving life.
Giving
Sure.
life.
Yeah.
And people don't realize statistics are really good for the people that are donors. They
Mhm.
tend to monitor their blood pressure. They're
Right.
not taking any of that for granted. They take
Okay.
good care of that organ.
Right. Sure.
It's incredible.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And obviously a big shout out to the UCLA program that you worked with.
I love UCLA. I love these people. They're incredible. I'm very, very fortunate to be in that program. It's one of the best country. Yeah.
And probably the last question, where you draw your inner strength from now, whether it's a particular song or particular things that you do or hobbies.
Draw my inner strength from. I'm a firm, love is my religion. I believe in, I'm very well supported. I have wonderful children, and I have a
Right.
wonderful husband, wonderful family. I'm lucky. I had an invasive fungal infection in 2019. I should not be here, but I am,
Right.
because I am loved.
Right.
And that's why it says love out in the
Sure,
courtyard.
right.
This is, there's a lot to fight for.
Sure.
It's a good life to
Yeah.
keep fighting for it.
Sure.
And I'm going to be,
Sure.
I'm going to be a grandma.
Okay, congratulations. We'll keep it a secret until the day. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for walking us into your home and your story and your life. The passion and love that you're trying to put out is so clear, and I think the message is also important, that people not be afraid to donate, to put it on your cards, and not be afraid to get tested, and to see if they may be a match if they get asked, and not be afraid to give and to be willing to give.
Give life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so important.
Can I tell you one more story?
Yeah, please, I love it.
Greg, about not quite a year after, well, a little bit, about a year after he donated,
Right,
he was going to a Bangles rehearsal,
right,
and he lifted up the synthesizer,
Sure.
which is like a weighted key synthesizer,
right.
and he had something called a coronary artery dissection.
Wow.
And I was not at work. I was sick that morning.
Right.
I was home. And I worked on him, CPR, for 6 minutes
Right,
while
wow.
the ambulance guys came up and they had atropine on the truck.
Right,
This
sure.
is a non-defibrillatable rhythm.
Right, wow.
And I chewed aspirin
Right,
and put it under
everything.
his tongue.
Right, wow.
I'm like beating the crap out of him. My CPR
Sure.
looked awful,
Right,
but it was
sure.
effective.
Right.
So,
Wow.
so my point of all this is that he's an everyday hero.
Right.
But I was a one-day hero
Sure,
to
right.
pay him back.
Sure.
And that is like, I mean, I never envisioned a day where he wouldn't be here. I just always
Right.
thought he's going to be here forever.
Right.
And so, like, the madness of that.
Yeah.
The madness of
Right.
that.
To truly save his life.
So amazing.
Yeah.
So amazing. So I think that we were supposed to do a lot more things.
Right. And meant to be together.
And
Literally.
and together we have to,
Right.
yeah.
Sure. No, it's an amazing love story. It's an amazingly incredible
and I don't have to do the
situation.
dishes forever.
Right, exactly. And your debt is paid because you saved his life. So he extended yours and took away your pain.
Right.
But you
He's
saved
the bigger
his.
hero,
Right.
clearly.
Well, sure. Okay.
Clearly,
Sure.
he's the bigger hero.
Sure.
Yeah.
But still, what you did is no minor feat. Like you said, and that CPR came in handy.
How about that?
So take your CPR classes.
Take your CPR.
Exactly.
It works. I'm telling you,
Sure.
it works.
Yeah, yeah.
It's amazing. The best part of this whole story is as the rig gets here to take him in for, they say, do you want to ride in the ambulance? I said, yeah, I just go get out into the ambulance. And they come to the door and they go, Mrs. Hilfman, maybe you should go back in and put pants on. I was in my underwear.
Working so hard to save his life. It was just a minor detail.
Shock much?
Right. Exactly. That
Were
comes
you in
first.
shock
Sure.
much?
Right.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
They're like, go back and
Just-
put your pants on, young
Right.
lady. It's like, oh yeah,
sure,
pants.
that's right. That could come in handy.
It's fantastic.
A pleasure. You guys are just, I mean, it's an amazing story. And from the moment I heard it, you all accepted months, in advance. And it was just so nice. And appreciate you letting us come
But
to
I
your
love that what
home
you
and share your
do.
stories.
This is so incredible.
Well, I think we need to share more of these types of stories.
Yeah.
Because we can't get enough of them out. I think the music
you work with pain
amazing.
people. You understand
Absolutely,
it. You know
sure.
what the chronicity does.
Yeah,
It takes away
absolutely
your
does.
light.
It does.
Yeah.
And your dignity
Yeah.
and your sense of being wanted and loved and
Right.
cared for
Right.
despite, and like you said, the medical community is also broken in certain ways. It's not so easy to always feel like you can pick up the phone or reach somebody or things like that. So
Right. Advocacy.
yeah.
You've got to find somebody. If you can't advocate for yourself, you need to get somebody
Right.
who will. Because
Yeah.
that's where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
And that's the part that you and I worry probably most about is
Yeah,
the people who
exactly.
don't have advocacy.
Right, may not,
you know?
be able to have that voice to,
Yeah.
but it's good to, I think in hearing stories like you feel empowered to find a way to hold on to music, their source of light or strength, and to then
Yeah.
find people like us
Yeah.
that are willing to help because they're out there.
Absolutely.
Sure,
I'm a lucky girl.
sure, absolutely. Yeah, lovely person. Thanks so much.
So lovely to
pleasure.
meet you.
Definitely, absolutely.
You're the best.
Sure. No, thanks.
You're the best.
Sure, no, it's important. Thanks.
You did it.
Oh, we got to do a big shout out to Lyle Gregory. Without him, so he's the one that brings everybody together. Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
I love Lyle.
Sure.